Alexander Whitfield was a bookstore owner and a beloved member of his community before and after his death. But he wasn't the best businessman, and no one knows that better than his son Joshua, who has now inherited his bookshop, his home, and has to try to find a way to get along with Maggie, his very introverted employee with social anxiety and an aversion to change. And while Josh is busy trying to iron out the business portion of his inheritance, Maggie is dealing with all the things that she didn't understand in terms of the bookshop business. Maggie and Josh bump heads almost constantly, and if one of them has to be the bigger person, it's kind of a coin toss who that would be. Welcome to Fictional Narrative. I'm Neri, and it is Cozy Saturday. If you're new here, Cozy Saturday is where I talk about the newest cozy mystery that I've delved into. I give a non-spoilery review, followed by the rating, tell you whether or not I'd continue the series, and then little warning and we move into the spoilery review. Today we're talking about A Book to Kill For by Harper, and this is the first in the Bookish Cafe mysteries. So by no means do I want to mislead you. I'm going to say this first of all because I started off talking about Josh because he is the most logical point in which I could bring up this little introduction, right? And there is a little bit of a POV flip for about 2 chapters in the entire book where we get Josh's POV, but for the rest of the time, we're in Margaret Bell's POV, or Maggie for short. Maggie is an interesting character in that I think there are traits that she has that I would find really grating, and I did find really grating, but at the same time, I can't help but root for her because throughout the book, you hear about how much Alexander, during his life, would talk so highly about her and all her potential. And a lot of it, again, does have to do with the fact that she's so introverted. She's got a lot of social anxiety, which the book doesn't even call social anxiety, but it is described as that. And to be honest, I think a lot of that, the character probably just needs to go to therapy, but this is a fictional character. We're looking for growth, and maybe that doesn't factor into this equation for this series. Hopefully the character will learn to grow into her own. It's unfortunate that Alexander's death is what becomes the catalyst for her having to get used to new changes in her life. Now, since this is a cozy mystery, I do have to say that this is not a spoiler. Alexander's death is not what we are investigating. There's another death that we are investigating. Alexander, for all intents and purposes, died naturally of old age. Just 1 minute he was working, and then the next, he's gone. And a lot of this we see from other people and what Alex has told other people about Maggie that makes you really believe that Maggie can become better. The writing for this is very concise. The series lays out kind of what we need to know for our first mystery in terms of the setting, and you can picture it in the very beginning of this story. And I say that because this is the non-spoilery section. In the beginning of the story, we're told that there's this really bad weather, it's raining, and there's flooding, and the bridges are flooding. So everybody basically is trapped in this town. Whether they're tourists or whether they live there, they're trapped in this town for the duration of whenever that storm decides to let up. It kind of creates this little bit of tension in terms of, well, are we here with a killer? Are we not here with a killer? Do we know who the killer is? Who is the suspicion? What is the town gossip? And in the meantime, these two characters, Josh and Maggie, are just trying to grieve for Alexander. But because of the course of events, they're not even allowed that. Josh is pretty immediately suspected of murder. And Maggie's like, I don't like him. I don't like what he's doing. I can understand why he's doing it. This is his bookshop now. I just have to get used to it as an employee if I want to work here. But also, did he kill someone? But why would he kill someone? That doesn't make any sense. Nothing makes sense to her. And now she has to figure out how to clear her new boss. And their dynamic is pretty interesting. It's very much dislike to lovers because we get pretty much in the first chapter that Josh is introduced that he is very attractive. Maggie finds him very attractive. As a matter of fact, anytime anybody talks about Josh in this entire book, they never miss out on mentioning the man is attractive. I get it. I believe you. He can build stuff for his bookshop. The man is hot. I know. And with him being a suspect for murder, you'd think people would be a little bit more cautious, but no. Have you seen Alexander Whitfield's son? Isn't he so hot? Yeah. So it's very obvious that I think they are going to end up as lovers, but it seems like it'll be a slow burn. And it also seems like they have a lot to get used to each other and a lot of understanding each other's boundaries to do. Imagine, your boss speaks highly of his son, but you've never met his son. And then your dad speaks highly of his employee, but you never met his employee. And then suddenly your father dies, and instead of being the bridge that brings you two together, living, it's his death that brings you two together. It's honestly, they're trying to make the best out of a very sad situation. And they probably both need therapy for their grief because it was not worked out in this book. Maggie has this feeling of self-righteousness to her that I like because once she sinks her teeth into something, she can't let go. She has to figure out that mystery. And I do really like that about her. Throughout this book, Harper Lynn weaves in these comedic moments that I really enjoy. Anytime there's a twist or some kind of reveal, it also comes with a little comedy to it, which adds to the coziness of it. And I really appreciated this as a very light read, and it was a quick one too. The mystery, while not particularly being a very difficult mystery by any means, is resolved in a fun and chaotic way that kind of endears me to these characters more, like they really grew on me. And I really enjoyed that. So for me, I would definitely recommend this book, and I am continuing this series. And I did rate it a 4 out of 5. So that's where I stand with this book. Let's move into the spoilery portion. Let's talk about this tension between Josh and Maggie, because they're both in mourning. Again, throughout this whole book, they are still both grieving. For Maggie, she felt like Alexander was like another father to her. And she never thought of anything but to go see him in the shop, work in his shop. She felt pretty blindsided when he died. And she was like, what if his son sells the store? What will I do? And because she has the keys to everything, she's like, I'm going to grieve by I'm just going to go and rest in his apartment above the bookshop for a little bit. Not realizing that Josh is thinking, I'm going to stay there because I inherited it. This is where we get our wires crossed and our boundaries crossed. And they're trying to figure out between their attraction, way that they work together, how it's even going to work. And I do have some issues with romance in the workplace, but I didn't feel that so much here just because there's so much shenanigans between the two. There's so much trying to figure out that dynamic, and it doesn't seem like either of them are ready to even cross that bridge into acknowledging that they may have feelings for each other. I don't feel weird about the situation quite yet, but I think ultimately if it's going to be a conflict of interest, they should figure that out. But if it becomes, like a family business, okay, I get it. Anyway, super cute. Josh wants to expand the bookstore. He decides, I'm not going to sell it, I'm going to expand it. I had such issue with this course of events because, okay, tell me why this man is like, I want to expand into the furniture shop next door. I'm going to turn that into a cafe. Is that logical for a bookstore? Yes. And then he goes, I want to also turn it into a lounge at night so people can come by and chill and drink. Not impossible. And he's going to start grand opening night with this cafe with Maggie in the bookshop and him in the cafe. And because the whole town is trapped there and this is an event, everybody is coming to this event. There's nothing else to do. Do you see my issue? And then he has this back and forth with Maggie, like, what if I need you in that cafe? And he's like, but you need to sell books. Like, let's not forget, you're also a bookstore. I don't make drinks. That's not part of my job description. Exactly. Maggie is so logical for this. Like, it is not part of her job description. She is a book seller. Is she the best salesperson in the world? No. But then she's not going to go and be your barista with no training. The building of this cafe was kind of like, it's happening, but we're going to do like movie magic with this. There's no extra baristas. We don't know how he put the menu together. We don't know if they're just standard lattes that he's making. Is there a special kind of drink for opening night? Is there, particular drinks with different flavors? What is he going for? Or are we just getting like drip coffee? Like, this is what I got my degree in business for, to judge businesses in cozy mysteries theoretically, and only that. It is not actually to work in business, although it probably doesn't help that I've also worked in a bookstore and a cafe alone and separately. So I'm kind of like, this is disaster. Back to Maggie, though. She's very adverse to change. This is very, very hard for her. She's grieving as well. We talked about the apartment situation, and that was weird, but it's also kind of weird that she's so introverted and so withdrawn into herself without a social life that she doesn't keep in mind that other people have boundaries as well, just her own boundaries. And there is something to say about isolating yourself so much that there's a certain level of like arrogance or self-centeredness that comes out of that. Like, you are only seeing yourself and not other people as people. Maggie has a huge problem with this. She also gives off pick-me energy. Maggie seems like she hasn't emotionally matured since high school. It is really, really grating. But Josh is really extroverted, and the book is set up so I'm assuming in the series she becomes better and more open with herself and more confident. We do see a little bit of that in this book as well. And hopefully, I would like to see her grow into a better character than one that can unironically use the phrase, why purchase the cow when the milk is free? Regardless of if she's talking about a fictional character. There is a character that I want to talk about. His name is Gary. He is the police officer, and it almost seems like this is set up to be a love triangle, but in all honesty, I do like the camaraderie between him and Maggie as the person who is investigating, as the professional who's investigating, and they're in a small town, so it's like his first murder, and her amateur investigating and them bringing this stuff together. They went to high school together. They have a certain amount of respect for each other, which is great. But none of that means that they're very close. And because of this mystery, they get closer. And Gary honestly seems like a really, like, he's just sweet. Where like Josh is a little feisty, a little giving in to miscommunications. Gary's like, I do not want to have any miscommunications. I will say what I need to say, and you will say what you need to say, and I appreciate that. Like, he's like written as a pretty straightforward character. The villain catching was fun, and I mean that literally, like they literally had to catch the villain. The reveal of the villain was comedic. It wasn't like, take off the mask. It's you. No. It was funny throughout. because this was not supposed to be a hard mystery, but it was fun in that because of the whole issue with the storms and the flooding, law enforcement and Maggie all literally try to catch the killer. And eventually, the killer is caught, and it leads to this very chaotic police station scene, which every single person that is involved with this mystery just shows up and creates chaos as they go. I found that kind of unnecessary, but very in tune for this book. All to say, I thought it was well written. Love the comedy. I guess you just have to be angry with characters sometimes to hope that they'll grow and become better people. So if you watched this far, thank you so much. And I will see you next Cozy Saturday, where we follow a character who is fresh out of jail and not looking to go back.